Good afternoon, everyone. I know we're going to have about 12 senators here, but we figured we'd start with quality before we moved on to quantity. But we're here today to talk about the Biden border crisis and the things that the administration is doing, not to make it better, but to actually make it worse. As you see from the chart here, we've had a historic number of what are euphemistically called border encounters. The problem is this is a hodgepodge of everything from economic migrants to sex offenders to drug dealers to people who are convicted felons. And frankly, because of the volume of people showing up at the border, they're overwhelming the capacity of the federal government to rationally process through these individuals. So you have people who turn themselves in, who claim asylum, knowing our broken asylum system will result in their being released into the interior of the country and told to show up for a court hearing months or even years into the future. And it shouldn't surprise any of us that the huge percentage of them simply don't show up for the court hearing. And because of a failure of enforcement by ICE, they basically know that they are going to be able to stay in the United States despite the fact they violated our laws in the first place. And then you have the getaways, as the Border Patrol likes to call them, and people who are up to no good making their way into the interior. Frequently, these are drug mules and part of drug cartels, and this is actually part of the business model of the transnational criminal organizations that engage in human smuggling and drug smuggling. They know that if they put enough people on the border, that it will overwhelm the Border Patrol's capacity to simply process these migrants. And that means that instead of keeping illegal drugs out of the country, that Border Patrol are processing unaccompanied children or simply filling out paperwork. And in many Border Patrol sectors, you're seeing them understaffed by about 40%. Because they simply can't do their job because of the green light and the welcome mat that's out for migrants to continue to come to the United States. There's a very important public health law called Title 42, which has been in place during COVID-19, and this has given the Border Patrol the authority to expel certain groups of migrants, mainly adult males, without having to go through a long, complex process. Obviously, people coming from around the world across our border, in many instances from hundreds of different countries. Many of them, perhaps most of them, aren't vaccinated. They've not tested for COVID-19 during the time we've been through this terrible pandemic. Basically, this has been a huge yawning gap in our public health laws. We're still wearing masks on airplanes and buses and public transportation, but people are continuing to pour across the border and put the rest of this country at risk. Title 42 is scheduled to expire unless it's extended. The Border Patrol tell me that if it expires without a plan being put into place to allow them to handle this volume of migrants, they will simply lose control of the border. There's only so much that the Border Patrols can do, and frankly, it's the responsibility of Congress to come up with changes in our asylum laws and provide additional resources and tools to our law enforcement officials on the border to deal with this crisis. Finally, let me just say, I mentioned the drug problem. Last year, 100,000 Americans died of drug overdoses, and the vast majority of those illegal drugs come across the border. And so you see the smugglers working with the drug smugglers hand in hand, because if you overwhelm the Border Patrol on one hand with migrants, that obviously frees up for the drug cartels the ability to smuggle these drugs into the United States, which, as I said, have taken the lives of 100,000 Americans just last year alone. Senator Langford.
Senator Gordon, thanks for hosting this and pulling this all together. Last year we had 2 million people that illegally crossed our border. It's the highest number ever.